Other parasites. Just to mention, there is much more which is affecting the bees. For instance, a beetle, the small hive beetle, which is coming from Africa, south of the Sahara, but has been spreading almost worldwide now, especially in North America and Australia. It is very damaging. In Europe, it has been possible so far to keep it out through quarantine measures. However, in the last couple of years, it apparently became established in southern Italy. So we can expect that once it's on the continent, through migratory beekeeping and so on, it will spread also through Europe. Further relevant parasites is, for instance, Nosema, which doesn't look very spectacular. It's just its spores. It's a unicellular fungus, which is more or less everywhere. It is also kind of has a parasitic lifestyle and is causing diarrhea of bees. This is also a quite common pathogen of honeybees. Beekeeping practices is, besides the pests and diseases, a very important factor because, as we have heard, bees are in most parts of their range, honeybees, domestic animals. So it's logical if the beekeeper is taking care well of them, they are doing well. It's the same like with cattle or with sheep or cats or dogs. So there's a lot of beekeeper can do to keep his bees healthy. Especially in regions where they have to overwinter, that means under temperate climatic conditions. It's important to provide them with an appropriate hive, but also to regularly check the health status of a colony and, if necessary, to treat it against diseases like varroa, but also to look at the food stores. Is there enough food for overwintering, for instance? So as we mentioned already, without a beekeeper, at least in some regions like Europe, partly North America, most bee colonies would be no more able to survive. They would, after a couple of years, killed by varroa, which is nearly in every hive. So what are the basic needs of a honeybee colony? Of course, food, carbohydrates, nectar, proteins, pollen, an appropriate shelter, which is the beehive in that case, and a safe place without toxins, whatever kind of toxins, diseases, predators, parasites, also not to forget vandalism, which can be a problem for beekeeping. So that's actually the preconditions the bee colony needs to thrive under human control. To that belongs also, for instance, a good placement of the hives, that they are, for instance, not exposed to flowing cold air or that they are not too much exposed to severe weather conditions. It should be a place where they have available food all through the season. I mean, if they are set up in a region where there is a monoculture of sugar beets, they will not be in a good shape logically, because there's nothing to forage for them. And as mentioned, monitoring of the health is really of the hives is really crucial, because it's frequently like if you early enough recognize a disease, you can treat it. After that, it may be too late. Now we come to the weather, which is always a good topic, and for that I hand over to Coralie again.
Good. So so weather also plays a role, either directly or indirectly. Because directly it is very important that the hive keeps the temperature in the hive consistent, and that's actually what they really do. They keep the brood at around 35 degrees, and in the winter the core temperature in the hive must not fall below 13 degrees. So for the hive it's very important that they keep the temperature at the right level. But also indirectly, of course, weather can play a role, because if it's cold, you don't have enough foraging, and of course then the amount of nectar that the bees can actually get to is going to be less, because there's less nectar flow. And of course then you have the severe weather events like flooding and storm and drought that of course also negatively impact honeybees. Not only honeybees, we know, but they also of course there impact the floral nectar production again. So it's again also that indirect effect. Of course, also important to have in your mind is when it's cold or wet, it is less attractive for the honeybees to fly out. So then they're also blocked actually in looking for that foraging space, and that's sometimes what we see. It's warm in spring, so they fly out and they go foraging. They use up their energy, and then it becomes cold again or wet, and they're tired and they need food, but they're not able to go out anymore. So weather also in that respect plays a role. Regarding genetics, of course, beekeepers have a certain goal with their honeybees. They want an efficient honey production, or they want good pollination services. And of course, breeders discovered that actually honeybees respond quite well to selection. So what do you then start selecting for? Of course, properties that boost the things that you need the honeybees for. And so that's what happened. There was a lot of breeding, and what you then saw is that we saw new characteristics pop up. But of course, sometimes those characteristics that are also needed, like the resistance to pests, suffered a little bit from that focus. And therefore, the bees are very diverse due to mutations and this selection that took place. And we have certain bee populations which we call races. And these races are basically the gene pool that you can choose from in selecting the bees, and it's really used by breeders for the selection of bee stocks for the desired characteristics. And what the beekeepers have really focused on is breeding for calm behavior, because then it's easier to handle the honeybee colonies. Of course, they don't want the bees to swarm, so they've tried to modify that as well. And of course, more honey production is also something that is of course of relevance for a beekeeper. But as said, yeah, it sometimes comes at a loss, because if you are then less able to be resistant against pests and diseases, then you also weaken your colonies with that. And of course there you see that especially when big pressure came in, for instance on the varroa mite, then those genetic characteristics played a role. Regarding agronomic practices, of course the importance of crop protection products is clear, but we need to use them in a safe way also to respect pollinator safety. And what we see is that crop protection products are frequently, of course, highlighted as the key factor impacting bee health. But actually what we have seen is that normally when pollinators are harmed by crop protection, it is linked to incorrect or irresponsible use of products. So what is really important is the responsible use of crop protection products. And for that, of course, products are thoroughly tested for their safety to bees. And we need to keep the exposure of the products as low as possible. And we do that with best practice measures and with application technologies.